Get up for a while. Cut it on the sexy dancing floor. Don't touch that dial. Only if you want to give it more.
Prince Edward Island band Paper Lions released its latest album last October and had big plans to tour, until coronavirus happened. Colin Buchanan is a guitarist in one of the quartet of Prince Edward Islanders, along with John and Rob McPhee and drummer David McDonald, that's been putting out some of my favorite pop rock for more than 15 years. They've won tons of awards, toured the US with the band Cake, and had their music featured in a bunch of popular television shows. It's the kind of music that starts and I immediately want to dance. I want to play it at every summer picnic because I don't know if it's possible to be sad to this music. It sounds like it's meant for giant outdoor festivals where thousands and thousands of people are dancing. So I want to ask Colin what it was like when he and the band realized that none of those shows and none of those giant outdoor festivals were going to be happening this year. Here's Colin Buchanan of Paper Lions. Hi, Colin. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you
Good.
today?
I'm well, thanks. What are you drinking on this happy hour?
On this happy hour, I got something extremely special. These are the benefits of living in a small little place like Prince Edward Island. My favorite local brewery is just literally up the street from me, and it's actually called Up Street. And I messaged my friend and told him that I was coming on the show. Shout out to Kyle. And he got me this really interesting beer, which hasn't even been released yet, but it's a Gamay Noir Saison.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sorry. And this is part of their Million Acres series. So it should be interesting. It's like 9%, so it's a strong one, and it's like kind of like a wine sort of beer. So.
Is it a wine taste, or is it made with wine yeasts, or what's the deal with the Gamay Noir?
Both. Yeah, I think that's like it's like a wine technique, or it's a specific kind of like grapes, I think. And
Okay.
I think it's like this Million Acres is like a barrel series that they do. So I haven't tried it yet, and I think it's like brand spanking new. So I'm very excited. I even have a branded glass here.
Wow. Okay. I love it. I love supporting them too. Podcast premiere. Beautiful color. Yeah.
It's so nice. So
Yeah. You get that rose color from the grapes, I guess.
Yeah, it looks great. And the verdict, I guess.
Yeah. Let's see.
For a 9% beer, it's crazy smooth, actually.
Oh, dangerous.
Like,
I love it.
Yeah. It's kind of got a little bit of a funk to it, and it's like fruity like a wine, but it's still like a nice beery taste. So it's very, very good.
Well, then hold on. I had poured myself a farmhouse ale from a local brewery called Helix, but I think I need to match you. So we're going to pause the podcast for a second. I'm going to pour myself a second glass of beer, and I'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
So same brewery, because I said I have something better, and then I thought, wow, that sounded really mean. But no, it's the same brewery. It's just a blackberry sour. So it's something a little fruity, and I'll have that nice color like yours. I was jealous of the color, basically.
It's very, very nice.
So cheers, santé.
Cheers. Clink. Delish.
Nice. Okay, now we can talk music, and we can talk everything else that's going on in life. So your band Paper Lions, I've been listening on repeat to stay together for the last week in preparation for this, but also just because it's super addictive. I love a lot of the tracks on it, and I would love to see you live, but that's not going to happen, especially, well, where I am anyway, for the foreseeable future. What was it like when you did realize that wouldn't be the case? You wouldn't be traveling around this summer?
Obviously, the first reaction is to be sort of bummed because, performing live has just been like something that's been such a part of my life, since I was, 16 years old. And, but obviously, the global pandemic kind of takes precedence at this time. So obviously everyone, there was some emails circulated, and we had a couple gigs on the books, and we had a bit of a chat, but it was a pretty quick conversation for our group, just basically being like, no, the proper thing to do is to kind of cancel these dates. And then kind of as the pandemic kind of unfolded, a lot of those decisions were kind of made for a lot of artists as well. At the time that we kind of canceled them, we kind of did it kind of for our own sake, and we kind of thought that maybe government would get involved and close borders and things like this. And of course that eventually did happen. So.
Yeah. What do you have on the books? What are you hoping might still go ahead in the next while?
Well, to be honest, Prince Edward Island, where we are, it really got, we're not out of the woods yet, but really relatively unscathed in comparison to the rest of the country, and obviously parts of the world that's just been like decimated. We had no deaths and very few cases, under 30 cases on PEI, and they're all considered recovered at this point. So, and the nature of being an island as well, you have sort of an extra level of security, whether it's real or just sort of psychological security.
No one's sneaking on anyway.
No one's sneaking. Well, they could if they're real ambitious, but anyway, so we're kind of in what's called phase 3 of our sort of provincial plan of kind of like reopening, which is, I know, not nice for like other places to hear that are in such kind of dire straits. So we've been all right. Like the island itself, like we're kind of opening restaurants, and I went to yoga today, which is crazy.
Oh my gosh. Were you 2 meters apart? Like your mat from the next person? Did they have to set up the studio differently?
Basically, yeah. They, everything is in accordance with our public health officer. Heather Morrison's her name. She's been really great. I know each province has such a great, for the most part, leadership team at the helm, and we're really lucky to have Dr. Morrison. She's been really clear and concise with her messaging, yoga was interesting. It was like they had like little sort of spots where you could set up, and you didn't sort of deviate outside of the little marked off spots, but. Right. Other than that, it was like pretty much normal, like as normal as things can be. So,
so you're taking care of your body, you're taking care of your mind. What are you doing for your music, though? How are you still practicing? How are you playing with the band? I guess you're not all self-isolating together, and you're not even isolating now. What stage are you at there?
We are, so actually, speaking of up street, my band member Rob just lives like 3 doors down from me, and
does everybody just live 3 doors down from you? All the beer, all the friends?
It's not quite that way, but it's not far off. Dave, our drummer, lives kind of this way, a few streets as well, and although I haven't really seen the guys, they've been really hibernating with their families. They've got a few young kids, and they've been kind of hunkering down, and I have been talking a lot to John as well. He lives out in the country in Belfast, which is a community that we grew up in. So he's out there with his family as well, and I've been talking to John a lot on the phone and stuff. And we really look forward to the day that we can play live again, and there might be a chance that we get to play on PEI because, as I mentioned, things are kind of opening up a little bit more here. So there's some talk of like some summer concerts, whether it be outdoor only or maybe some sort of drive-in type
cool
scenario. There's a lot of ideas that are being floated around right now. So
I know you have a lot of good summer festivals there too. Like, the island is gorgeous. I toured there actually with a band years and years ago, and we just had the best time. I think we ate nothing but lobster. We met nothing but nice people. It was just phenomenal. So I'm really glad that maybe some summer music festivals will go ahead again.
Who is the band?
Ainsley McNeely is the singer-songwriter, and I was part of the backup. That was a really fun tour.
Very cool. I didn't know that you were a musician as well.
I played a lot of glockenspiel on that tour and did a lot of backup singing. But yeah, no, I have a music background. But we can talk about that on another podcast. What about you? Have you been doing balcony performances? What has the band been doing?
We actually, just because we can't be in the same space, well, I suppose we could now, kind of social distancing within the same space, which we might do. But actually, there's a really great, like our music organization here is called Music PEI, and really they did amazing work getting together this what's called the Tiny Island Concert Series. Like basically the first week or the second week of the pandemic, basically they got some funding. They leveraged some provincial funding basically to have live stream concerts of island artists, and they would choose an upcoming artist and a established artist to perform. They did 2 a week. They've done it every week since basically the pandemic began, which is amazing because it really it brings community together, and also just like puts money in the pockets of artists that are being really hard hit at this time. So we couldn't do it together, but John, our lead singer, our fearless leader, he did one from his home in Belfast. So he was part of that and gave the people a little Paper Lions love online.
Have you had a lot of support from fans?
Yeah, it's been nice. They, you try to share what you can online, and it's hard to, you want to just try and connect in a meaningful way, but it's not always easy. Sometimes you're just like not, I find for some artists it's really difficult at this time. Like a lot of artists who are, great musicians, great songwriters, all of a sudden are thrust in a position of being like audio engineers, video producers, video editors, branding managers, marketing managers, all these different things. There's so much like burden on the artists, I guess. And so I've gotten I'm a audio engineer as well, outside and inside Paper Lines. But I've gotten like an onslaught of messages from my friends and other artists that I know that are just like, I just bought this little 2-channel recording interface. I'm trying to set it up for my live stream. Like, can you help me? And so, you offer help where you can.
Oh, that's great. So you still have some work during this then, I guess.
Yeah, it's obviously very different. The recording studio that I work out of is closed down right now, but it will be opening back up kind of in the coming weeks, like pretty soon actually.
And I guess if you're mixing, if you're producing things, there's always something you can do with stuff, with material that you already have.
Absolutely. That is the great thing of I don't know, for me it actually worked out quite well. I had a bunch of kind of mixing work and more, I guess what you call like post-production sort of work that doesn't require shoulder to shoulder kind of collaboration. It's more like kind of solitary work.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to have like tons of that sort of work to stockpile that I needed to tend to anyway. So
but I see in the background there you do have a keyboard, you've got 2 guitars.
I do.
So you probably have a pretty decent setup and you're playing at home a fair bit.
Yeah, it has been nice to kind of just like I don't normally work out of home. I usually really like going to the studio and having a separate kind of zone for my music, but it has been nice to kind of integrate it like into my home life, and I work in a different way and I write in a different way, and I've still been like quite busy, not just with mixing and stuff, but like lots of adding different layers and messing around with some of my own music and my own productions, as well as sort of ideas potentially for Paper Lines down the road.
Oh, that's fun. I'm really excited that you have some creativity coming out of this. I read an article with Patrick Watson, I think it was in La Presse here in Montreal, about how he could write melodies, but he couldn't write lyrics, I think it was. Don't quote me on that, but I think that was the gist of what the article was saying. And I found that really interesting because, in a time when so many people are down and you have such happy music in Paper Lions, I don't know the rest of your music, but are you still always writing really anthem style songs, or how does that change? And are you able to write the same way as before?
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen sort of how this pandemic will affect our own writing style. But I would say, given the makeup of the four of us and how we what we like to tackle and share as far as sort of lyrical content in the group, it's we definitely lean more on the lighter side of things, and I think that can be found basically in sort of any circumstances, global pandemic, or there's all kinds of different things going on in the world right now as far as different uprisings and different protests, and there's certainly lots of stories on sort of the negative side of things, but certainly there's lots of positive as well. But who knows? Maybe this global pandemic will make a sort of a sort of a paradigm shift for our band that would be normally kind of, I don't know, happy-go-lucky. Maybe maybe we're gonna turn dark in 2021 or something.
Well, I won't say don't do it, because I have confidence in you as a band and as songwriters, but I do love a lot of the upbeat, really fun pop rock type music you produce. And in your latest album, Stay Together, I read an article actually about you guys on Forbes when it came out, that it's kind of about how you've grown as a band, and like any relationship, you had to fight for it, and you've become a little more comfortable in your own skin. So maybe this is kind of the development of your sound, or maybe it's more on the relationship side, just with you and the band. But I know COVID has put a lot of stress on relationships too, so I'm wondering if where you are now as a band still applies to when you made that album.
Definitely. I think, in the making of this past record, Stay Together, it was a lot about us exploring, where we are personally as well as a band. We're not a fresh-faced new band the way we were, when we were like, we started this band when I was 16, 17 years old, and you grow so much over this time, and you grow together, and obviously there's, like, in the music industry, there's so much pressure to kind of keep charging forward and keep reaching for that next sort of level and trying to level up with each record, and it sort of is can be a bit of a sickening game sometimes, and I think with this record, we really wanted to maybe create something that reflects more where we are right now as a group and personally, which is more in a, sorry, my phone's like dinging in the background, like where we are right now personally. We have grown up, and we're trying to reevaluate basically what we cherish about this band, what we cherish about each other, and what our music can mean to people, but also mean to ourselves. And I think we were really pleased or lucky to do that work basically before something like this global pandemic happens, which is causing a lot of people to become more introverted and think about what's important to them in their life. And I think as a band, we really did a lot of that work before this record. And I'm glad we did, because, I think there is a lot of despair out there right now in artists that maybe haven't taken that time to reflect, because they're caught up in the machine of just like getting one foot in front of the other and just trying to kickstart their careers and trying to kickstart their life as an artist. So I empathize with people that are in that position and are more in kind of an existential crisis at this time.
Well, it sounds like your timing was as good as it could have been for the album you produced. For sure, and I think it's just interesting, though, that you say that, you've developed so much as a band, because clearly you have. But when I listened to this album, I And if I knew your music from years and years ago. I actually played it on another podcast that I hosted back in the day when I first moved to Montreal, the Midnight Poutine podcast. I don't even think you can get it anymore, but I fell in love with it. And this album feels very similar to that in terms of the quality. Like the quality is really high on the production, which I really appreciated, and it was just so addictively fun. So if I'd put like I think it was Lost the War that I played on that one.
Okay,
and
yeah.
If I played like Lost the War and something from this album together, it still has that same feeling. It still has that like vibrancy. And I wouldn't say that you guys were older in the music industry. I wouldn't be able to say how old you are or how long you'd been doing this for. It still sounds really fresh. It still sounds really just really exciting. And so I appreciate that it's not as much as you've changed, you've stayed the same.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think there was like a concerted effort to like, not like say a return to form perhaps with this record, but I think there's maybe sort of more effort in paring things down and sort of distilling sort of the essence of the band and the essence of why we like to play together, you know, with each other. And, you know, because we've been doing so even before this band, you know, especially John and Rob and myself, we just would make music in his parents' basement, you know, when we were 10, 12, 13 years old. And, you know, our career is just not something that we ever thought was going to become anything, you know. It was just, it really just started as a few shows kind of, as a lark, really, and it's kind of turned into a crazy 15 plus year career. So it was fun to reflect with this album and kind of think about some of those earlier records and kind of what made them special, and maybe try to tap into that energy again.
Because you have had a lot of success over the years. People might not think, oh, from PEI you could go and tour with big name bands or be featured so prominently in television or win so many awards. So do you think that PEI has helped you in that way, or like made your career path easier or harder?
Absolutely. I think definitely made it easier and helped. You know, there's kind of like in step with our band was kind of the emergence of you know, things like I mentioned earlier, like Music PEI, which is just like our provincial music organization. That wasn't really a thing when we first started. It was, but it was like very much a small entity. And as far as other bands, you know, there wasn't that many bands, to be honest. There was certainly like early successes. I don't know if you know the band Haywire, but they're from PEI. They're, you know, basically the only band to really make it out of PEI before. And I think kind of around the time that we started, and groups like 2 Hours Traffic and English Words and different groups like that, and some singer-songwriters that had a lot of success sort of around the same time, it brought a lot of awareness to the island. And we were just really happy to be kind of a part of something that felt bigger than our own sort of little band, because we're from like kind of like the countryside, and the sort of music epicenter is in Charlottetown, which is where I live now. But you know, we were very much outsiders even of that whole scene. So yeah, we were really proud of being part of PEI Music, and being able to kind of make a living as PEI artists is something that I'm very proud of, because I don't know, there's part of me that thinks that if we were in a bigger city, we would have just been like swept up in a bunch of other groups that kind of looked similar, sounded similar. You know, there's just a certain I don't know, there's a certain I guess what made us unique in part was the fact that we're from Prince Edward Island, and we really embraced that, and we're proud of that to this day.
And you should be. I would say, though, it's probably a bit more than that. But we've talked a lot about music, and this is also a food podcast. And I feel like,
Yes.
we talked a little bit about beer, which is a good start, but we have a lot more food to talk about, because I feel like maybe you were nominated on behalf of the band because you went, ooh, food-related podcast. I could talk about that? I don't know.
Absolutely. I think actually and talk about the early days of the band, we were, I wouldn't say any of us were foodies whenever this band began, but a few of us have developed a bit of a palate as the years have gone by. So I was pretty excited to actually do a podcast that's not just about music, but also food and beverage and stuff. So.
All right, so you got the music work out of the way. Let's do a little lightning round. Take a bit of your beer there. Get ready.
All right.
I think you need to catch up to me. I might be drinking you under the table.
9%. I don't know. I'm kind of scared.
We don't promote alcohol on this podcast. We promote responsible consumption.
Yes.
So I do have some music-related questions for the lightning round, but let's talk about some of those specialties. What's your go-to dish?
So my go-to dish is actually, it's very East Coast, fishcakes.
Good.
I actually got the recipe from my friend Chris Kuplin, who's the chef at this great music venue / restaurant called the Trailside. And it's out kind of in the countryside of PEI, and they do small little intimate acoustic shows, and they actually have a fantastic food menu, and the fish cakes are like by far their number one bestseller. And so my friend Chris, who I actually play in another band with as well, the owner of Trailside, we have a cover band that's called the Love Junkies. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. But I asked Chris one day, I was like, okay, I need you to write down the recipe for me. He's just like, I'm not writing it down. I'll just walk you through the steps or whatever. He didn't want a paper trail of it or anything. So,
okay.
We'll
not put it in the show notes. Got it.
No, I wish I could, but it's a little bit, it's a little bit different every time, I guess. Anyway, Chris walked me through the fish cakes, and I still sort of make them, 4 or 5 times a year, and it's always special whenever I do.
Okay. Can I just ask you though, cod or haddock?
Oh, it's actually no cod, haddock, and salmon.
And salmon. Oh, okay. Give it a little bit
yes.
extra flavor from the salmon.
That is right.
Good to know. Okay. What have you been making a lot of during COVID?
Well, I'm also, even though I make fish cakes, I'm sort of pescatarian, vegetarian kind of hybrid, I guess. But I have been making a lot of just sort of fried rice and vegetables. It's so comforting to me. And
satisfying.
So yeah, that would probably be number one if I'm just looking to do a quick dinner or a quick lunch.
Okay. Is there any food on your rider for shows? Presumably you're not at your friend's venue and he's not making you fish cakes.
There is some food. It's pretty light. We certainly don't want anything too heavy in the stomach before you kind of get up and sort of rock out and sing on stage. So yeah, it's just, veggies and dip and maybe some hummus in there. And so yeah, nothing that is heavy or smells bad.
What about best food at a music festival you've played?
I remember maybe the first year we went to South by Southwest, we were also very, very new to food truck culture. And I remember we found this place called maybe it's called Cilantro or Cilantro or some sort of play on cilantro. And they had these kimchi fries. And I remember we were just it was a Korean, Mexican, Tex-Mex sort of combination, and we were just our virgin PEI taste buds never tasted anything quite like this before. We were all impressed.
Well, I'll send you my recipe for kimchi. How about that?
Oh, I would love that, actually.
I was going to ask you about PEI potatoes. How many PEI potatoes have you been eating lately, since the government tells us all that we're supposed to eat them?
Well, sometimes I think I don't eat that much potatoes, but I think if it's like compared to like a mainlander, it's probably is. I mean, I currently have a large bag of PEI potatoes in my fridge. I mean, they're just such a staple of like a side dish staple on PEI. And one of my good friends, Matt, told me once that he doesn't remember a single meal not having potatoes as like a side growing up.
Mashed, roasted, or fried.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's just like every island family basically had them as a side every sort of home cooked meal.
Okay, best way to cook a potato then? That's the next question.
Ooh. I mean, I do love roasted probably most of all. That's probably my go-to. I do like mashed for like sort of sentimental sort of childhood sort of value, but yeah, roasted probably best.
Okay, and then lobster, oysters, or mussels? Because I know you have them all there, and you're going to have your choice.
I mean, lobster's he's the kingpin, really. It's just so sweet and so delicious. My mom actually dropped me off a lobster roll yesterday, and it was so good. And I know it was like anything prepared by your mom is just it tastes better.
Well, that's actually the next question. Favorite meal that your mom made growing up?
Oh, I mean, I was spoiled as a child. I had two great cooks in my mom and my father. My mom was more like the real, like, everyday kind of, making sure we were fed. And she had so many great meals from just like, it sounds really simple, but like her spaghetti was really good and it was like very comforting to me as a child. And my father would do special occasions, and I remember he would make like a mushroom ravioli or something like that. That was like super, like, really, really rich. If I think back, it would be like a sauce that was basically butter. But
right. You're not thinking about that when you're 5.
No, I didn't know how anything was made, so I'm just like, this is delicious. So
he didn't recruit you to help make the ravioli?
No, he recruited me to watch the dishes afterwards. But
smart man. So I was going to ask, what's your favorite thing to cook at home? But maybe we covered that.
It'd probably be the fish cakes, or I mean, that's a fun one to have in my repertoire, especially if someone's like visiting. Just because it's like fun and it's kind of like involved, and yeah, probably fish cakes. It's a good one. Speaking of South by Southwest, I remember when we were down there, we toured with this band from Austin that we would always stay with, a band called the Octopus Project. Anyway, we'd always stay with them in Austin when we were down at South by Southwest. And I remember one night we wanted to treat them, and we were just like, all right, we'll cook you guys dinner, and we made them. I took on the fish cakes as my
nice.
My little piece, and they loved it.
Oh, so good. Okay, so then talking about music again, what's your karaoke song?
Well, it's often changing, but my friend Jill actually had her birthday party over Christmas, and I think I discovered my new karaoke song, which is Crowded House. Don't Dream It's Over. I don't know if you know that song.
I don't know that one. I'll look it up.
It's not Don't Dream It's Over. I can't remember exactly the title, but it's like, hey now. Anyway,
that sounds familiar. I probably know it. I just don't know any names to songs. I just know how they go, and they're pretty catchy.
It up. It's a good karaoke song. It's got real heart.
Okay. I know you like really good riffs too. You've got some great guitar riffs in Stay Together. What's the best music you've discovered lately during COVID?
Trying to think of I'm sorry, my lightning round isn't like lightning. But,
it's okay. I think I've maybe given up on the lightning round as a concept at this point in the podcast.
I think, if I could open up my Spotify extremely quickly. I've been there's a band from Toronto that I really like called Jaunt released an album.
Okay. A new one recently in the last
during COVID. I think it was maybe a month ago. Anyway, that's great. I've been listening to that a lot, and I've been really liking this artist Carolyn Rose. I don't know. I think the album's kind of old, but I had never really heard her before. And
It's really an opportunity to discover bands that you didn't know before, as well as new ones that are releasing albums. Like, I feel like if you're releasing an album right now during COVID, either it's great because people discover you and they're at home and they have time to do this, or you really go back into the archives and you discover things that you didn't know existed.
I feel like a lot of artists are like trying to like having that conversation where it's just like, is this a good time to release a record or is it a bad time? And
yeah,
I think it just sort of depends. There's lots of great, I mean, there's Perfume Genius as well, released an album, and like Fiona Apple's new album.
Oh, right, yeah.
Blake Mills released an album through the pandemic. Anyway, great stuff.
What about the first musician you saw perform live?
So, you know, we're a little off the beaten path here on PEI, so we don't always get, you know, the real marquee acts. But I remember the first like real show that I went to was actually the country artist Travis Tritt. I don't know if you know Travis Tritt, but he was like really big in the 90s, and I wasn't like a fan, and my parents weren't a fan, but my dad was working for like the local kind of telephone company called Island Tel here, and I remember he got free tickets to the show, and me and my friend Kyle Panton went, and my friend Kyle was a big country fan, and this was like the first, like, it was like in our local stadium, and yeah, Travis Tritt. I don't know the year, but I remember thinking it was cool. It wasn't my favorite music, but they had like, you know, all these guitars, and like just being in the vicinity of like music gear as like a 10-year-old, I was like vibrating. So
wow, your future was ordained a bit.
There it was, thanks to Travis Tritt. So
you mentioned the small stadium. Well, what's the best place that you've ever played?
Actually, probably my favorite show we ever did. It was, I don't know, something about it was just sort of like a good time. Like we were coming off of playing a bunch of shows, and we were really kind of like road strong as a band, and really things were really cooking. And we were touring with the band Cake at the time, which I like loved growing up. And
yeah, I understand.
Just, like, this was like the final show of that tour, and we had kind of at this point had become like kind of friends with the guys, and yeah, I just loved that band for a long time. And we were actually playing the Metropolis in Montreal.
Oh, cool. That's a great venue.
It's a great venue as well.
Not too big, not too small, good sound.
Exactly, yeah. And I just remember being kind of like, you know, quite young as well, and just being like, all right, if this is it, then that's cool. Like it's been a good run. Kind of thing, so.
And then it just got better from there.
Thankfully, you know, things have like gone on and on from there, but that was definitely a moment. I remember having sort of a pausing on stage and just being kind of like, all right, this is great.
Okay, so what, besides family, friends, and long summer nights, what influences your music the most? That was actually taken from a Midnight Poutine questionnaire back in the day. I thought it was a fun one for musicians.
Long summer nights, yeah. That was probably up there, actually. We're experiencing some summer-like weather here right now, and it is quite inspiring, especially coming off like a quarantine phase. So
yeah. Yeah.
Friends, family, long summer nights. You know, those are three big ones for us, I would say.
And what else? What's number 4?
You know, I really try to stay current on music as well. Like it's really, I'm still like very much a music lover, and I still really love listening to music. You know, it's my favorite thing. So I guess I'm inspired by other artists, you know, what other artists are doing and different sounds, and sort of I was going to say the slow evolution of music, but it's really a very fast evolution, especially in the last, you know, 10 years. Like the whole, especially kind of the recording world of music and the songwriting has really, really changed at a rapid pace. And I find it super, super exciting and super inspiring.
Is there one thing in particular that comes to mind that recently you've just been super into? Like either a technique or a style or a song or a melody or a person?
I mean, just in general, I feel like, you know, whenever we were younger, I'm assuming, I'm not going to assume your age, but like the
not
pop
that young.
artists,
So yeah,
the pop artists were just kind of like pop artists. They were kind of frivolous, kind of meaningless, just they didn't really stand for much. But now, like, kind of the biggest artists in the world they stand for something, and they're releasing albums that are like kind of weird, like Beyonce releases music that is like, she has some hits and stuff and some bangers, but like there's some weird tracks on Lemonade, and like Rihanna and Kendrick Lamar, and these are huge artists that are releasing like some pretty challenging music, and I find that super inspiring to see that level of artistry being adopted by like en masse. And I think it speaks to kind of the intelligence of a music audience right now, and the willingness to kind of follow an artist down a path.
Okay, I have just a couple more questions for you. What do you think the best way to spend $1 million in 10 minutes is?
I mean, I guess the question is, how did I get that million? Like, I feel like
Don't think about that. Everybody asks that. It seems like it's legitimate money. Just go with it.
Well, I think I think obviously finding some great organization to donate it to would be like just probably the best thing that you could do right now. There's there's so much going on in the world, and there's so much sort of education going on. As far as myself, I feel like I've been reading so much in the last week about what I could do to help people that aren't as privileged or as fortunate as I am. And I think it's easy for me to say I would find a great organization to give it to, but the more and more I sort of think about these things and think about what makes a difference and what matters to me in my life, I would like to think that I would do something like that, I guess.
And hopefully put a little bit aside to make another album.
Yes. Oh, yes, for sure.
Because I hope there is another one coming, because I want to know what is the future for live music in the next year, do you think, for your band, but also in general?
Yeah, and I guess that also speaks to, like, I mean, the notion of privilege is, I and my band are in a really privileged position of, like, being able to work from a studio that does not cost crazy amounts of money, living in a country that has support for artists, living in a province that I can own a home in, as well as being an artist. It's just not the case for a lot of artists across this country, and certainly across the world. So yeah, I think we are in a great position as artists based on Prince Edward Island, that we will continue to write and record music, because through the making of this record, it was really important for us to sort of decide, like, what are the things as a band that we enjoy, and what are the things that we don't enjoy. And there are aspects of being an artist or being a band, quote unquote, trying to make it, that are exhausting and you don't want to do anymore. And I think our philosophy sort of came from that place where it's like, let's maximize the things that we do like doing and minimize the things that we don't like doing. And thankfully, for at least my sake, and everybody in the band shares the same thing, feelings as I do, which is the things we enjoy are writing and recording music first and foremost, and performing music for a great audience. And it's probably not going to take us as far from home as it once did. We probably want to stick closer to home, and that's really important to us as a band. But we really are in a great fortunate position of being able to write and record in our backyard, and we feel really thankful for that. So more records to come, for sure.
Yeah. Last question, and then I will just cheers you for that thought, because that's lovely. What was the most fun song on Stay Together to record?
Fun song. Oh, I mean, one song that we really love is actually called Stay Together. It's the title track, and I think it's actually the last track on the album, which I I think that song really is very special to us for a number of different reasons. It has we find, especially with our music, like the songs with almost the most simple sentiment end up being the most special to us. Like I think about the song, My Friend, that we have, that has a really, really simple message of, the meaningful relationships that you develop over time. And a song like Traveling is sort of also about friendship, I guess, and sort of a Good Samaritan sort of parable. Stay Together similarly has a really simple message of sort of getting through a hard time and having a community around you that is able to kind of help you through that time. And beyond lyrically, that song is really special because we have a couple live musicians that play with us. Bruce Rooney, who actually grew up just next door to us as well. He's really talented musician. And Marley Saunier, who is actually Dave, our drummer's sister-in-law. And so they were actually able to play on those songs. We wanted to get them in, and Bruce rips a guitar solo, and Marley rips a saxophone solo. And I think for us it was a real sort of coming together of us as sort of a band at our core, but also part of a larger community that we've been able to build, being a band for 15 years. So that's a special one for sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Colin. If people want to listen, they go to Spotify. Where else can they find you?
YouTube, Apple Music. I think we've got some stuff on Bandcamp. I can't remember. But yeah, Spotify is always good. That's probably the main one that we like to promote. So
great. Well, thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your beer and support more local businesses, and good luck with all your music.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I couldn't ask Colin on mic if we could use a couple of his tracks to intro and outro this podcast, but you're going to get the entire track, Stay Together, to end. So don't stop this podcast, or actually the beginning song that we use in the intro is Don't Touch That Dial. So to be really cheesy, don't touch that dial and listen to the end of Stay Together. Oh boy. Okay, I'm going to have all the contacts for the places I mentioned and that Colin mentioned on the show up on the show notes for the episode, wherever you got this podcast, whether that's the video version on iTunes or Vimeo, or the audio version on Spotify or Stitcher. And you can find both on my blog, multiculturiosity.com. And I'll have another episode for you next Thursday. I'll be talking with sake importer, Metropolitan Premium Wines and Sake's representative, Jenna Sapinoza, and we'll be debunking sake stereotypes and learning about the inner workings of local liquor corporations now that people can buy mixed cases of wine and sake. We'll also be talking jiu-jitsu. Thanks for listening, whether it's a happy hour where you are or not.
I wish you would stay together. I wish you could see all the good you made together. I wish you wouldn't leave. I wish you would stay together. I wish you could see all the good you made together. I wish you wouldn't leave. You said you made plans to leave. Tired of being strangers, tired of misery. But stranger, things have happened to better and to worse than making up, not breaking up, talking it over first. If you could see what I'm seeing, look and you will find what you got is worth believing. Things will change in time. I wish you would stay together. I wish you could see all the good you made together. I wish you wouldn't leave. I wish you would stay together. I wish you could see all the good you